And you're live.
Hi, welcome to Painting Together with Acrylics. I'm Gigi Chen in my home studio in New York City. So I'm very excited to be painting with you guys today. We are going to be painting and learning about texture today by painting this lovely little chicken. And a shout out to my friend Rosa who took a picture for me in Canada, this little Canadian chicken. So this is what we're doing today. If you look down below, you will see all of the supplies for this particular show. And let me see. So we're going to go through the colors. I'm going to go through the supplies really quickly with you guys. And also down below, there's also a link where you can buy more of the paint and buy mostly the things that I'm using, like at least like a facsimile of what we're using, like the brushes and the paints and some of the supplies. So here's my sample painting, my little guy. And let's go through some of this paint together. So we're using titanium white, cadmium light, yellow ochre, cadmium orange, quinacridone red, burnt sienna, burnt umber. We have some red violet, ultramarine, Payne's gray, and some black. And right here I'm using a little bit, I have a little bottle cap right here, filled with some medium. So I like to use this brand. If you guys just want to kind of use, this will help you kind of move the paint around a little bit and keep it from drying as quickly. This is a golden open acrylic medium in matte. So it also comes in glossy, so don't get matte medium. That's more of like an adhesive. This is seriously something to kind of mix into your paint to make it kind of go smoother. So that's what we're doing. I also have here, my paint is all on a wet palette. So if you look down below, there's also a link to a how-to video on how to make your own wet palette. All you mostly need is these like flat sponges. If you're gonna make it yourself, this one is like store-bought. You can use some parchment paper, you know, for those of you guys who bake. It's great to have a little parchment paper and you can lay that over. And make sure you put it in a plastic container where you can put a lid on it. So as long as you put a lid on it and you have all of this set up and you wet the sponge, then you can keep your paint going for a pretty long time. Sometimes I have my paint going for like a week, 2 weeks, depending on how much I use it and how much I open the container. Also have water, and I have a giant variety of paintbrushes. So I hope you guys have like as many as you hopefully as many varieties as you can. I have some flats, I have some small ones, and we're just gonna go through this whole painting step by step together. So I am going to switch out my, moving all my resources. I'm going to switch out my paint. So I'm working on a wooden panel. You guys can work on canvas, or you can also work on some really tough mixed media paper. I like using wood, but you don't have to use that. You can use whatever like you have comfortable and what you already have available. So what you can probably already notice that I'm going to just move this light so you can see this just a little bit better. So you can probably see that I already have a little bit of like a little pencil sketch. I did that by doing a little transfer using graphite paper and a photograph. And there's also a how-to on how to do that down below, where you can see a video on how you can transfer very easily like a photograph using graphite paper onto your surface. But for those of you guys who have not gotten to do that yet, like if you want to spend a little bit of time sketching, down below is also where you have the resource for where you can download our reference picture, which is this lovely little picture of this chicken. And I'm going to, for those of you guys who actually have not been able to, like have a sketch drawn already, like take your time. I'm going to answer some questions that are already here. Someone is asking me, how do you prepare your panels? So I actually buy these from the hardware store. I go to a lumber yard and they cut these panels for me, and they are actually already pre-gessoed. But what you can also do is you can get, if you're going to use a panel, you can also get some gesso, and then you can, you know, put that on and then and do a few coats and then use a really good sandpaper. Like I like to use a 220 grade sandpaper and smooth out the surface. So that's how I would prepare my surfaces if this one was already not prepared, and I've prepared many panels before. I just like to go to the lumber yard and get these prepared ones so I don't have to do it myself because it takes time, you know? So what you're gonna also do is like if any of you guys have any particular questions, like write them out in boldface on the very side, and then I can see it a little bit better because I know sometimes you guys are just kind of chatting along with each other, and I want to be able to see like questions, like personal questions about how this technique's gonna work. So, hello everybody. Hello Elizabeth, good to see you. Hello Sue. Hello Suzanne, so good to see you. Susanna is saying she is washing while baking, which is amazing because I love baking. I wish I were baking right now, but we're painting instead. So I'm going to start off with a very fine brush, and we're just going to do a quick sketch together because for those of you guys who have not actually drawn it in yet, let's you can draw it with pencil also. I'm going to take a little bit of this umber, and I'm just going to do like a little outline of the chicken. So I'm going to do this arc, another arc. And we're going to do a quick shape of the beak together. And like whatever I'm actually doing here, you can go back and change. So none of this is like set in stone, you know. I'm just going to do a quick sketch with my paints. But if you are not comfortable doing a sketch with paint, you should do it with a pencil. Just like a very light pencil, so you're not like going crazy, you know, so you can kind of erase. I do these like transfer techniques to basically speed things up because, you know, this is the 8th class and I want to be able to get through this process fairly quick, at least the very beginning, fairly quickly, not the whole painting because that'll be too fast. Sometimes and also sometimes if you're making a lot of work, it's really great to know all of these different like tools. Like it's kind of like adding more tools to the tool belt, you know, like just like I'm teaching you guys, like I was talking about how to make a wet palette, which I bet a lot of you guys didn't know you can make a wet palette and keep all of your paints dry. Keep your paints wet with a little wet palette that you can make yourself without spending tons of money at the store. You know, and last week somebody was asking whether they can keep their gouache in it, which I assume you can keep your gouache in it. Any sort of wet material will probably be really great. I would say probably the only thing you probably can't use a wet palette for is oil paint because there's kind of no reason to. Oil paint takes such a long time to dry. You actually don't need I legitimately don't think you need a wet palette because also water and oils don't mix. So let's see. I'm just going to do a quick sketch around his little face. I don't know that much about bird anatomy. I mean, I paint a lot of birds, I paint a lot of animals, but I don't know that much. I can't really name a lot of anatomical parts of a chicken for you. But if my friend Rosa is watching, she sends me amazing pictures of her chickens all the time, and I'm so in love with them. I'm a city girl. I grew up in New York City, which is where I am right now, and I don't get to see I don't get to see farm animals very often, and when I do, I'm very, very excited. I wish I got to, I mean, not to idealize like living on a farm or even idealize living in a city, right? Like sometimes you just want to think about, I like to have little fantasies of thinking about what it'd be like if I like grew up on a farm or like spent more time as a farm as an adult, you know? Spent more time on a farm as an adult. Like it's kind of a dream sometimes. So we kind of have her sketched in a little bit more. I'm just going to move and adjust some things. And we are going to basically block out where some of the darks are going to be right now. So kind of have her sketched in a little bit. So you want to take a minute and catch up with that. And I'm going to take a bigger brush and just sort of brush in some darks. So I'm going to go right into my umber and just sort of do an underpainting. You know, like for those of you guys who have never taken my class, for those of you guys who have, I like to talk a lot about making paint from dark to light and also doing it in layers and stages. Like nothing just happens right away. Like we're not painting and all of a sudden we have like a finished painting. We're going to do this whole thing in stages together. So I'm just going to paint this in. So it looks crazy right now. We're just going to do underpainting. And then we're going to paint over this, of course, because the chicken is not. Just kind of looking at the reference. And so the reference, I have it obviously up on the screen. But for those of you guys who are just joining me, you can also download the picture that we're working on. You can download the reference on the side, like down below in the description. And also down below is a link to where you can buy a bunch of the materials that I am using, like the paint. I'm mostly using Utrecht paint, and different links are like maybe sort of different brush suggestions. You know, for those of you guys who are kind of curious about maybe what kind of paintbrushes I'm using a lot of different kinds, but the link will show you some maybe very streamlined versions of what I'm using. Okay, so just mostly using water and just laying this in, laying in the underneath, laying in the underpainting. So how's everybody doing? Where's everybody from today? How many of you guys are joining me for the first time? How many of you guys are painting along with me today? And how many of you guys are kind of just dropping in saying hello? Like, I think a lot of my friends actually just watched the show. A lot of people I actually know, and some people that I've been talking to since I've been doing this like live class with Artist Network, is that some people kind of like to hang out and watch, which is kind of fun. I used to watch a lot of Bob Ross painting classes. So that was always like, when I was a kid, I thought it was pretty fun. And I wouldn't paint along because I didn't have oil paint when I was a kid. But it was because I didn't even really know what oil paint was. So I'm going to start to now block in the background. Oh, hello Elizabeth again. How you doing? Hello. Okay, so I'm going to take some, I love to see like familiar people. Hello Cheryl. Okay, so I'm going to take some Payne's Gray. So I'm switching up to like this filbert. So it's kind of not too big, you know. And I'm going to I'm just going to start painting in my background. I'm going to just sort of and take a little bit of black also, and sort of block in the background. I'm going to choose to go like that. So we're just laying things in like very loosely, so it doesn't really look like much right now. Just have some faith that it's going to be awesome later. Yeah, someone says Bob Ross is a great artist. I kind of think that Bob Ross was one of the most influential artists of the 20th century, because maybe even now, right? Even the 21st century, because we still talk about him. When I was a kid, I mean, I would say that just because I know so many people who got into art because they watched his show as a kid, and I am definitely one of those people. I used to watch his show, and then I would ask my mom for a watercolor set, and I would sit in the backyard and paint all day long after I watched his show. I painted tons of landscapes, lots of flowers, and it was like totally the thing that I loved to do when I was a kid. Hello, Mark from East Sussex, UK. Hello. Are you just kind of hanging out with us today, Mark? Or are you going to paint with us? So I'm going to using some Payne's Gray, and I'm also using some black. I mean, for those of you guys who watch this with me, like I love Payne's Gray, and I love Ultramarine. I love these like beautiful blue colors. So I'm also going to grab a little Ultramarine, and then I'm just going to start to block in some of these darks just to kind of get it all in. And I like to paint from dark to light. So we're going to do this all in layers and steps together. Hello, Annette from Ohio. I love it. I love people dropping in. Hello, Angel from Greenwood, Indiana. Okay, just adding a little bit of water. And when you're not using your paintbrushes, please remember to put it in your water. And also have a rag. I have a rag that's on my lap so I can keep my pants clean, and also use it to blot my paintbrush in case, so you don't really see it on screen, and also because it's a mess. It's an old, it's a very loved painting rag. And for those of you guys who don't know yet, all of these episodes are available later after the live stream. And the entire archive right now, this is episode 8, is available on YouTube here at the Artist Network channel. And also we have a beautiful little landing page where you can see a little bit about each episode, learn a little bit more about what I do and what I've done with Artist Network, including my articles and my other videos that I've done with them. And you can learn a little bit more about the show. And also artistnetwork.com is an amazing website. There are dozens, maybe hundreds of artists that are on that site, with a lot of different how-tos. And that's a really great place. And I have a few videos there. I have a sketchbook. I have a helping you kind of boost your sketchbook kind of a how-to video there, and also another acrylic class, and some classes about using warm colors and cool colors, and how to use that to juxtapose your paintings. Oh, hello from Puerto Rico. Hello, Leslie. Yes, I also really love chickens. I wish I were around them more often, but you can't really keep so many chickens in New York City, Leslie. So, okay, I'm going to go back to using I'm going to a flat brush. So this one is like a Princeton, it's a 1/2 inch flat brush. So I'm going to just paint in, maybe I should use something bigger. Let me think. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm just going to stick with this. I'm going to take some Payne's Gray, take a little bit of white, a little bit of Ultramarine, add some water, and I'm just going to start to, because I added some water, it's kind of translucent, and I'm just going to put this over take a little bit more Payne's Gray, take some more white. And I'm just going to start to fill in, take some more Ultramarine, and I'm just going to start filling this in. So nothing too fancy. We're going to go back, but I want to leave some of these darks that are already here. We're going to keep the background fairly loose, but I'm just going to fill this in pretty quickly, and then we're going to start going back to the chicken. Take a little bit more water. Go backwards, take a little bit more white, get a little bit more Payne's Gray and Ultramarine into that. I'm just going to loosely put this all back in. Maybe take a little, I'm going to pick up a little bit of burnt umber too, and just sort of very quickly put back in, just like fill that in. It's not super perfect right now. I would say that we're going to be in this kind of ugly duck stage for at least another hour, just going to go over some of that too, but I'll go over that legitimately a little bit later. So everything is in stages, so it may look a little bit funny right now. It's going to start to develop into something kind of cool. Oh, Jerry's Autorama's here. You guys, I love you guys. Some of my favorite stuff. I order a lot of panels from you guys. Okay. Okay. Okay, just filling that in a little bit more. Still doesn't look like much yet, right? I would say the magic doesn't start happening until like an hour in. But right now it's just really nice to fill it in. So I'm gonna rinse out my brush. I think I'm gonna continue using this big brush, but you can use whatever brush you feel comfortable with. Nicola from Romania. Oh, hello, Romania. Okay, so we're still using this nice big flat brush, and I'm gonna take a little bit of this burnt sienna, mix it with some white. And sometimes when I'm looking at, and I'm gonna take a little bit of umber. Sometimes when I'm looking at these things, I kind of get a little bit confused also. Sometimes I look, even though I've painted the sample painting, sometimes I get a little bit confused even when I'm painting it again. So I know that I just put down, I mixed some burnt sienna, some burnt umber, and some white together. Okay, so I'm making that because I want to kind of put this all in phases. So it's just like this beautiful brown color, and I'm just gonna start to fill in a little bit more. So I'm not putting down a lot of paint, so you can still kind of see the underpainting here. So someone's asking me, do you place your colors from light to dark always? I generally do, because I like to build up. I like to block it all in. But I mean, there's always going to be exceptions, so you're definitely going to see me have moments where I make that exception. But when I'm first blocking in a painting, yes, I definitely do from dark to light. Like I basically laid in all of this brown first, and I'm painting it over, and I'm moving into the next phase, Constance. Like you see that right now, I've mixed in a lighter brown. So I just basically use some burnt sienna, some umber, and some white. So that's like the next phase. And obviously, as I said, there's going to be exceptions. But for now, I always like to go from dark to light, just because it makes a little bit more sense. Like we're gonna do things layering. Like I'm not going into the eye right now and just painting it. Like I want to work the whole thing, because once you overwork one place, you're gonna feel compelled to work the whole thing, the same way, And even though you can kind of go backwards, like I like to, I mean, you're always gonna be going backwards. You're gonna be going back and forth from place to place, But I like to think about it in phases. So I always like to think that once you start getting used to painting and getting used to drawing, actually really kind of getting used to anything like that's new, getting used to a skill of any kind, you learn to know in your head the steps in which to take. Like I've grown used to knowing that I paint from dark to light. So I already know that even though right now it looks crazy, I know that eventually it's going to look really nice. So I'm going to use a little bit more white in that. I'm going to take a little bit of that. Take a little bit of water, and I'm just going to start to block it in. Like that's the beauty of getting better at something, right? You start to anticipate like what could go wrong, and instead of necessarily thinking, and then after that you stop thinking what can go wrong. You start thinking, okay, like I just did this, how do I fix it, or what's the next step? Like when I put together these paintings, I always think about in my head, like how do we break this down? How am I going to approach this painting? Like, so the best thing to do is just to start to paint, just like lay it in. Don't worry about it. Like, that, the beauty of acrylic paint is that it dries really quickly, and because it dries really quickly, that once it dries, and if you've made a mistake, you can do it again. So that's like the lovely thing about it. Oh, so let's see. Mad Memento says I like to paint on my computer. Yes, I also really like painting on the computer. But what actually was great working on the computer is that you can fix it. If it's, you don't have to like keep repainting it. I mean, you do, but it's different, right? But I also, I prefer to do this, even though I really love painting on the computer as well. Like I love Photoshop. So I'm gonna switch out my paintbrush to a smaller filbert. So a filbert is sort of flat and it has like a round edge. So I'm just gonna use that just because I'm gonna use more water and just start to fill in, just sort of fill that in a little bit. Just to kind of get it going. Oh, I think I missed this whole spot. Hold on. There, now you can see it just a little bit better. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bit of, so I made this like beige mix. I'm gonna add a little bit of the Quinacridone red. And I'm just gonna use that to kind of block that in. I'm using some water. This is very watered down. And someone here is asking me, did you study color? I actually went to 8 years of art school. I went to my high school, was an art school, LaGuardia Music and Art, which was the school in the movie Fame. And I went to that for 4 years, obviously, because it was high school. And then I went to school to study traditional animation in college at School of Visual Arts. I didn't quite take to it. I actually became a painter, and I studied color on my own in high school and in college, but I mostly studied how to paint by working with an artist personally. I've been with her as her assistant, and she's been my mentor for almost 20 years. So actually that's mostly how I learned. And in a lot of ways, very old-fashioned. And I taught myself, and she actually taught me oil paint. So I oil painted with her, alongside her for the last 20 years. And then I taught myself acrylic. So, which the colors are the same, but they mix very differently. And they kind of go on in a similar but different way. So that was a little bit of a change. So yeah, I learned color. I sort of learned color on the go, right? Like, which is kind of a fun way of learning it. So you can still kind of see the drawing that I did underneath. And I'm just gonna do that. You know, when I went to college for animation, I actually, in my heart, always wanted to be a painter. And so when I left college, I was like, oh, maybe I should do this instead. Like you always know, right? I went into school for a really practical thing, and then I left school kind of joining this, sort of deciding that I kind of wanted to run my career in a different way. And that happens sometimes. Like, I guess what they say, like, follow your dream. Or in my heart, I knew I wasn't going to be happy. Or rather, in my heart, I kind of didn't love the idea of being an animator, even though I really loved animation. So learning how to use color, and to paint was like such a thing. Like, I loved it. So I'm kind of basically taking a lot of this red, taking some of the burnt sienna, and just adding coats of paint. So I'm kind of doing things in layers, right? So just like I said before, we are doing this in layers. And now this chicken looks brown. Looks kind of nice and dark. So we're still gonna just do this in phases together. So this is all the underpainting. I'm gonna take a little bit of this umber and go. But there's nothing like learning on the go, right, guys? I mean, I kind of think that's the best way to learn, like getting thrown into something. And I'm also gonna take this brush and just add a little bit of this yellow. So I'm gonna mix a little bit of yellow and this umber, this ochre. Sorry, I'm gonna take this yellow ochre and just fill in the eye, just so it's not so like stark. And I'm gonna take a little bit of this red violet and also just put it in the eye, so it looks, so I kind of know that the whole thing is kind of filled in now. Hello, Wagner Mega. Painting is your passion? Oh, I love that. Painting is also my passion, so I'm glad that you're stopping in to see it. Elizabeth said she started off in astronomy. Whoa, you started off in astronomy, Elizabeth? I have space dreams, as you probably know. Like, I have romanticized space. Hopefully one day I can go. I'm really amazed. How long were you in astronomy school? How long were you studying astronomy before you quit? Or rather, changed majors? I hate to say quitting, you know. That word quit is it's like too very specific. So this is now just like the underpainting. So I'm gonna go in and start to lighten up the whole thing. So I'm gonna take this white, take some white, mix it in with my umber, some white umber, and I'm gonna add a little bit of quinacridone red, some more white, and I'm just gonna start to, ooh, it's not very light at all. Let me just take some more white. Maybe a little bit of this cadmium, and I'm just gonna go in and start to lighten her up. Like we're not, so because I'm using a filbert, I'm gonna start using the edge of my filbert, you know, so as opposed to like flat, I'm gonna start using the edge. And I'm just gonna start to brush it. If you can't kind of see it, I'm gonna kind of brush her this way. I'm gonna try to angle my brush so you can see it a little bit better so it's not in the way of the camera. I'm just doing things like this, like a light brushing. Okay. Oh, someone's asking about warm and cool colors. Okay, how about we look at this real quick? These are warm colors. They're basically the reds and the yellows and the warm browns, like the reddish browns. And a cool color would be like blue. So if you kind of look at, it's a good way. It's kind of like the difference between the colors of fall and the colors of winter. You know, when you look at winter, like the idea of warm and cool, right? Why don't we look at like the idea of even the fact that in winter we think of ice. We think of ice, and we think of blue, we think of whites. And when we think about fall, which is a little warmer, we think about yellows and oranges. So I would like you to think of it more like that way. Like even looking at my palette, like I'm going from warm to cool. See all these blues? And then all of this is warm like fire, hot like fire, and cool like ice, which is like what blues are generally. So it's a little bit vague. I guess like that would be a whole other lesson. But I hope you if you kind of put it in your head, that kind of visual of like fire versus ice, you know, like fire versus ice, fire and warms the warm colors of fall as opposed to the cool colors of winter. Like maybe that would kind of help you just a little bit, you know, I don't even know. That's a whole other lesson. So I'm just taking my brush and I'm sort of brushing in very loosely, very coarsely, like lightening it up. So add a little bit more white to that mixture, and I'm just starting to very coarsely lay this out. Yeah, I know, it was a little bit vague. I hope that was okay. Let's see. Oh, and Zoe says, oh, hi, Zoe. Zoe says this is her first time painting. Ah, I'm so excited that this is your first time painting. Oh my goodness, Zoe. That makes me so happy that your first time painting is with me. Like, that's really great. I actually haven't done a ton of teaching, and it's always been with people who have never, ever, ever painted before, which is really funny. I learned how to teach by teaching at parties, and everybody would be hanging out, and people would hire me to come and like paint with them for a party. And I would say that 99% of the people who I've ever taught at these parties have never, ever, ever painted before. So I'm using this kind of beige color, which I made with Sienna, a little bit of the Quinacridone red, and this umber. And I am an added white. So I'm using that to kind of layer in, and I'm leaving some parts. And I'm using this like flat filbert. Okay. Oh, hello, Michelle. And I'm using that to kind of just put in. See, I'm using my filbert because it kind of looks like feathers when I do that. Are you painting, Michelle, or are you just hanging out? Oh yes, the seasonal reference helped you out. Good. I'm glad because I've never actually taught color theory before, and the way I paint, the way I teach painting is generally sort of more like a feeling, you know, which is helpful and sometimes not so helpful for some people, you know, like explaining something that I sort of inherently have learned how to do can be kind of difficult, you know. So I'm glad that that was really helpful, like talking about the seasons, talking about warm colors versus cool colors with seasons. Okay. Okay, so I'm still just filling it in very loosely. Oh, I love it. I love that my friends are watching and painting and or working on their own projects. I think that was the whole point of this whole series, right? I used to have painting parties with people, with my friends, with my artist friends, and we'd all sit and make our projects. And I really miss that. So I'm really glad that we started doing the show with Artist Network because the whole point of this whole show was that we could all paint together, and which is the name of the show also. But I also really miss having painting parties. I miss seeing my artist friends. So I'm still using that beige and we're just coarsely putting it down. Yeah, I mean, art isn't always super solitary. I share my art studio with several artists. And I mean, sometimes it's really hard to concentrate with a lot of people in the same room, but also it's really, really nice to feel like you're being a little bit communal. So I'm just still I put a little bit of water into this mix, and I'm still using the same brush, and I'm sort of just gliding it. Put a little bit of water. I'm just sort of still filling it in, you know. So now it's starting to look a little bit closer. You know, we're doing this in phases. Vedisha Patel. Yes, you should. You know, this is episode 8. So you can go to our landing page or also right here in the Artist Network channel and you can see all 8 episodes. This is episode number 8 of our show. So, and also, I don't know if you also draw, but Scott Meyer has a Wednesday live show at 3 p.m. Eastern also. And that's also right here on YouTube. And that's called Drawing Together. And that's a really fun class. And that's like also a really huge archive that you can look at if you want to also draw. And so for any of you guys who are kind of dropping in, painting along, like there's like a whole ton of resources that Artist Network has here on YouTube and also on their page. Okay. Oh, you've never Art for Life says they've never painted before. Okay, so don't be intimidated. It's only art. It's not scary, right? I mean, painting might feel different just because you're kind of grabbing it looks like there's like a lot of like equipment as opposed to just drawing when you just have a pencil. But if you have a few basic colors, like, and I would say I'm using Utrecht paint, but I don't think you need to use super crazy art materials to paint. You know, like you can have like every really great brand, like Golden, like Utrecht, like Liquitex, they all have like a slightly lower end brand, and they're a little cheaper. So honestly, it's like whatever. I kind of think painting it's not like, if you're not good at it, it's not the end of the world. But if you are just kind of hanging out and enjoying it, like just enjoy it. Like I don't really think that you need to be good at something to like it, or even feel comfortable with it to even like it. You know, I think that it's just a matter of have a good time. No one gets hurt when you're making art. It's the most lovely, almost sort of like super safe activity. You know, you can't get injured. Like, I've taken dance classes and I've gotten injured. But painting is a super safe place. So I'm just still adding a little bit more white, and I'm just using that to sort of brush on some more feathers. And I'm just lightening it. So you already like this little bird, this little chicken is getting lighter and lighter and prettier and prettier. And we're still just adding color. We're not doing anything crazy yet. We're still just layering it and layering it. Like I said before, we're adding everything in phases. So already like she's starting to look built up. Oh, so Art for Life, you said you do mostly portraits. Portraits are hard. I have to say, that's pretty amazing that you're, like, painting's a little intimidating, but you could do portraits, which is, I kind of think portraits are the hardest thing to do. That's why I like to paint birds. Birds are not as difficult to paint and to draw as people. So I'm still just adding, let's see, just adding. So in some places I'm also dry brushing, which means I don't have a lot. I'm basically using up very little paint that's on my brush. See how these parts are kind of rough? So I'm just kind of dry brushing, talking and dry brushing. That's what I'm doing. Because like if you kind of dry brush it, it even kind of looks like feathers, you know? So not using too much paint and kind of creating uneven lines can actually create the illusion of texture. So I'm kind of just like very roughly putting that in. Hello, Claire. How are you? Yes, art is a really great way to express yourself, especially in the way that you're creating motion with your paint strokes, you know? Even if you are just trying to like replicate a photograph, the way you do it will be different. Like I mean, if there's like 100 of you guys painting this together with me, you're gonna have 100 very different pieces. And I've seen some of them. So after this class, and actually after every one of my classes, you can go to the landing page, and for every episode, you can post the work that you did during this class. So all of these episodes are available after we stream. So this is our episode number 8. So you can watch this episode later. You can go to our landing page, and you can post your work. I would love to see it. I have been loving seeing the work that you guys have been posting. And some of you guys actually have gotten in contact with me. Some people don't want to post. So some people have gotten in contact with me very personally and sent me pictures of the works that they've been doing. And I love that so much. So I'm just still using my big filbert and just filling her in. Filling her in. Oh yes, Leslie, painting and painting and painting is the best thing to do right now. It's the safest thing to do. And especially if you're spending a lot of time on your own or with your family members, this is such a great time to kind of like together get in touch with your creative side, you know? This is great. And for me, I love this. I love being able to paint with you guys every week just because it's been really great for me. Like I get to be learning. What is a landing page? Landing page is the episode page, or rather the show page. You can see the landing page for our show, like down below in the episode description. And also, they are also going to post. You can also post it. I think that they can also send you a link right there in the chat where to go to where you can see all of the episodes. And the landing page will tell you a little bit about this show, Painting Together with Acrylic. And you can also see like every episode. Ooh, sorry, drop my brush. You can see every episode and a little bit of something about the show and also about me. You know, the work that I've done with Artist Network. Okay, what other red is close to quinacridone red? Just red. I mean, if you have just like any sort of standard cherry red will work just fine. Like it doesn't really matter. Like I think especially for working on this particular painting, I would not, so you don't have to have all of these colors. Like you can have like just like a basic yellow, basic red, basic purples, basic blues, and you can very much create something very similar. Okay, so I'm just doing a little bit at a time, and I'm going to start just sort of brushing some of this stuff in. I also want to go back and work on the background a little bit, so why don't we leave that for a second, because I'm going to start overworking all of these feathers. But already, you know, she's starting to look very like, have like tufts of feathers. It's kind of exciting. Let's see, I'm going to go and get another flat brush. I'll pull out another flat brush. So I'm going to use another little flat brush. It's not too big. So you can probably see it a little bit better right here. And I don't know oh, this is like a low Cornell flat. So it's nice and flat, and I'm just going to start working on the background again. So we're not going to do a lot for the background. We're really going to just sort of create it almost like a gesture painting, you know. So I'm going to pull out some Payne's gray, some white, just like what we created before, right on my wet palette. Take a little bit more white. Take a little bit more burnt umber. I'm just going to start to, just going to start to fill that part in. I'm going to just take a little bit more ultramarine. With that white. Pulling in some of this gray. So I have like, basically I kind of want you to make some random grays onto your palette and just sort of use that to fill in this background. Like, I don't want it to be super crazy. You don't need to, I want to keep it pretty loose. I'm just painting again because I want to just kind of fill in the space. And I don't want to all have all this paint be kind of translucent. And I'm going to take a little bit of white. And I have here a little bit of medium, and I'm using that to kind of make, oh yeah, so Leslie, I'm using medium. So I keep this in this little bottle cap because I found that if I put medium right onto my palette, it absorbs it. Here. So Leslie, this is what I'm using. I'm using Golden Open acrylic medium in matte. It also comes in glossy. I don't love my paintings being super glossy just because when I put the light on, it's too shiny. So I use matte, but you can get it in glossy. But this is not matte medium. This is acrylic medium that happens to be matte. Matte medium is more of a, and somebody had asked me this before, but matte medium is more of adhesive. So this is like literally what you use to mix into your paint to kind of extend it a little bit more. Like sometimes if you don't have this already, use a little bit of water. And then you can extend the paint a little bit more too. But if you guys have a hold of this is like my favorite thing. So I hope that was helpful, Leslie. So I'm going to go right back into, and you're going to kind of see me using it kind of here and there as I kind of go along. Okay, let me go back to, and also I have a rag. So I have a rag on my lap and I am cleaning that up. As whenever I kind of clean up my brush, I blot it back onto my rag. So I'm just sort of randomly creating little bits and pieces in the background, like nothing too crazy. Like I don't want to spend all of my time on this background. The background is not the star. The little chicken is the star. Okay, so I'm just kind of going back and forth. Thanks for answering the questions about the red. I sort of get tripped up when I get asked that while I'm painting because I'm terrible at the names, particular names of colors sometimes, and instead of saying, oh, like coming up with something, I have to kind of go like, I don't know. I have to look it up and like know exactly. Like sometimes I collect a lot of different paint, and I don't always know the exact names of colors. I just know that I generally like to use the colors that are used in this show, you know. I have a lot of umbers, I have a lot of cadmiums. My favorite thing is like ochre. I love my Payne's gray, you know, which you probably see me use a lot more than I do black. I'm gonna go right back into the Payne's gray and this sort of, so thank you for answering that for me. Take a little bit of the umber. Yeah, it's terrible to be a painting teacher and forget the names of colors because I get really, I freeze up. I have to have everything be planned out or I get kind of confused. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over it. Yes, the chicken is the star. Okay, go back. Add a little bit of this Payne's gray. Just gonna slick it down. Take a little bit of the medium to kind of slick down some of this paint. There. So, you know, when I put down the medium, the paint smooths out a little bit. Take a little bit more of this white. Take a little bit of this ultramarine, add a little bit of white. Yeah, and I also don't want you guys to ever feel like the exact colors on my palette are exactly what you want and need, you know? Like I use a lot of different types of paint. I can use fancy paint, I can use craft paint, and I taught myself how to paint with craft paint, which literally says yellow, blue, and red, you know? So all the fancy colors, all the fancy name colors, you know, are really awesome, but sometimes I forget them, which is kind of crazy. So I'm going to go in and just sort of block in a little bit more of this background. I don't want the whole thing to stand out too much. Still want the background to maintain its status as a background. Okay. Just gonna fix that in. Oh, someone says, oh, Dave is saying he's doing this with digitally. Oh, what program are you using? You're literally painting this with us? With digital color? That's awesome. That makes me really happy. I'm sure that you can kind of get all these colors, right? You don't have to be just stuck with what I'm using. So I'm using a little bit more black, and then I'm just gonna add take a little bit of this and just sort of demarcate some more of these darks. Awesome. Right underneath there. And we're going to keep it pretty loose, but I kind of still want it to look like it's part of the design element, you know? Like my romanticization of the farm animals. Like I grew up around pigeons and sparrows in New York City, and squirrels, but not chickens. I didn't see chickens until I was much older. I mean, I love animals, you know, but I didn't get to see a lot of them until I started traveling as an adult. But when you kind of grow up, you know, in a big city, you really don't get to see things like this. So I didn't see an actual cow until I was 18, and I was so in love. I thought they were amazing. Okay, add a little bit of brown, rather like umber, not brown, umber. And there we go. A little bit. Take a little bit of medium, and I'm just going to glide some more paint over this way. Okay, I don't want to spend forever on this background, but I want to kind of just a little bit more. And now we should go back to our little chicken, the little hen. Okay, so let me kind of think about what I want to do next. How are you guys doing with the painting? You guys doing okay? Even the digital chicken that's happening right now, how's that going? So I'm gonna go and take this like smaller filbert. This is a number 0. This is the silver crystal brand. So it's kind of like, I have very small hands, but you can kind of see how big it is. It's not too big because I want to kind of go into, start working on the face. Okay, so let's do that. Let me take a little bit of the Sienna, add it to this Quinacridone red. And I'm going to take a little bit of white. I'm going to take a little bit of white just to kind of see what happens. And I'm just going to start to add, kind of clean up some of this. I'm going to do little strokes because it's not a very big brush. And fill some of this in. Kind of find, since I painted over some of it with the background, I'm going to just kind of find where those contours are. Just kind of fill some of this back in because you can kind of still see all of my drawing. Oh, Suzanne, my friend Suzanne is offering to take me to see the farm animals. Suzanne, this is from a chicken from a new friend that I made when I was up in Canada. And she sends me all of these pictures of her chickens. So yes, I would be up there seeing more Canadian chickens. Okay, so now that I kind of have that all filled in, right? It kind of looks wonky. We're going to do that a little bit more now. So let's go a little bit lighter. So I'm going to take a little bit of white and take some of that Sienna, some of the Quinacridone red, mix that in, add a little bit of white. And I'm just going to start now doing it in phases. Like I know that this part's going to be a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to start filling that part in and blocking out where the lights are going to be. Like this is going to be a little bit lighter. This is going to be a little bit lighter. And right underneath here, it's also going to be lighter. So, still in phases. Still looks crazy, but that's okay. At some point, this is going to stop looking so crazy. I promise. And I'm just going to take a little bit, clean that up. So I'm also going to go back and demarcate where some of these darkers are. Oh, somebody's asking me where I was in Canada. I was in Manitoba. It was pretty great. It was my first trip to Canada. It was a year ago. going to take a little bit of, actually I'm going to take a little bit of this red violet and mix it a little bit in with this umber. And I'm going to put my, try not to lean into this, I'm just going to outline this a little bit. Outline her little eye. To kind of demarcate. And then I'm going to take a little bit of this Quinacridone red and a little bit of this Sienna and just sort of clean up a very lightly. I'm going to take a little bit of this medium so it's a little bit more, so when I put a little bit of medium here, it becomes a little bit more translucent. And I'm going to just decide that this part's going to be a little bit darker. I know, it does kind of look like it's eyeliner. I'm going to outline, clean up some of these areas. I know, she's a fancy hen. I'm going to take a little bit of this mixture that I made and kind of go back in. I'm going to take, and just kind of darken out some of those parts. So, and I am using a very small round brush. It's pointy, and this is a Princeton #2. This is actually my favorite. This is a Princeton #2 round. These are actually my favorite pointy round brushes, or these like Princetons. And I'm going to take that. And this is like my favorite thing to kind of use to kind of start adding details. So you can see I'm already sort of adding, I'm using this, and I'm mostly doing this in like little bits and pieces, like little strokes. And I'm going to use this to sort of put back some of where the drawing is gone. So I'm going to put back the nostril, just to kind of bring it back. I'm using a little bit of this red violet and kind of putting her back a little bit. And I'm going to take a little bit of that and just sort of start adding her back in. Just sort of darkening up these parts. So slowly she's coming, she's taking shape. And so, you know, I'm going to work a little bit more on her face, and then we're going to go back to the back of her. But I'm going to take a little bit of this red violet umber and just sort of add back these little details and add back where. I also want to kind of do something else too while I have all of this paint, all this dark paint on my brush. I'm also going to start putting in things like this. I'm going to start adding, you know, where these little spots are going to be. So I'm still using my round brush. I'm just going to start adding where these little spots are going to be. And then we're going to paint over some of this, but not all of it. I'm going to show you how we're going to paint over some of it in order to create a little bit of depth. So I'm just sort of doing, and it's kind of random, you know. I'm going to sort of add a little bit of medium or a little bit of water if you don't have medium. And just kind of go, decide that some of these parts are going to be a little bit darker. And I also want to add, you know, kind of randomly, she's got these little markings on her. She's really cute, adorable little markings. Someone asked me, how did I paint the pink underneath the chicken? You mean the face, or like underneath her in general? I'll wait for that answer. I think you guys have a little bit of a delay. Okay, so I'm putting little markings. So if there is, kind of looks like there's pink light, it's because I kind of mixed the white a little bit with this quinacridone red, you know? So when I mixed up these batches, I did an underpainting with Umber, which is like a very warm brown. And then when I started making colors for her, I used a little bit of Umber and a little bit of Sienna and some white, and those colors are very warm. And then I also used a little bit, I mean, this whole part, the fact that it looks a little bit pink is because I used Umber. So going back to what we were talking about, warm and light colors, like Umber is a very warm brown. So because it's warmer, it has a lot more like reds almost in it. Like when I did like a very light coating of it underneath. So when I put a light coating of it, it kind of looks a little bit like it is pink, you know, because it's very warm, right? Like we were talking about warms and lights before. So, and by putting more warm tones over it, this can give it a sense of it being kind of warm and pink without having any reds or any yellow or any reds or any pinks in it at all. So if that's a little bit helping, you know. Great, yes. Somebody is also saying, oh, hello, KBD Draws. Oh, my friend Camilla is here. Hello. I love it when my friends show up and like watch what I'm doing, because it's like, it doesn't make me self-conscious at all, guys, you know? So I kind of added these little spots, and now we're gonna start working. I wanna let that to dry, and then I'm gonna start working a little bit more on the face and then over the whole body again. So I'm gonna take a little bit of quinacridone red and keep adding and add some white to it, and a little bit of this ochre and some more white. And we're gonna start working on like bits and pieces. So I am generally gonna be using a pretty small brush during this part. So as I said, I'm using this. I'm using a number 2 round from Princeton, and these are my favorite rounds. So I'm gonna go in real close, and I'm just gonna start painting, doing one little brush stroke at a time. So if you see in the photograph, this whole part is going to be, generally it's going to be like a white, almost similar to this, but I kind of want this part to be a little bit pinker. So I'm just going to go over it. I'm just going to very coarsely paint. But when I still paint, I'm still thinking about painting in terms of my brush strokes are still generally going to go this way, even if they're kind of be a little bit off, because this cheek, her little cheek, I want her to keep round. Someone's asked me if I've ever painted a cow. I have never formally painted a cow, but I have drawn many cows. When I was 18, I visited some farms up in Vermont. Totally blew my mind. That was a very long time ago, but I drew cows all summer. I even stopped eating red meat for a while because I was like hanging out with these cows, because I'd never been around farm animals before, and it was like this really strange thing. I love farm animals. I kind of wish sometimes that I wasn't always in the city. So I'm using this pink and just sort of adding. But those are my dreams, guys, you know, to like live part-time in a big city like New York City, and then part-time on a farm and hang out with animals, you know. But maybe I'm just kind of idealizing it. I don't know how many of you guys out there like live near farm animals. I kind of think it's kind of amazing. So, okay, let's see. Just gonna take this little brush and still continue to kind of add little things to it. You know, we're kind of getting to the point where we're adding ways to kind of highlight. I'm just going to start using this pink to kind of add. I'm also going to take less paint, take a little bit of this Sienna and Umber mix and mix it in there too, and kind of go over some of this. And take some Sienna, some white, mix that in a little bit of quinacridone red. So I'm kind of creating this other beige. So it's kind of coming together. I think I need to work on a little bit on the beak, no? Like I've barely touched the beak. If we do that, I'm going to change brushes. But I kind of want to just keep adding. So it's coming out a little bit more, you know? I'm going to take a little bit of this white. I'm going to mix that right in to that pink mixture. I'm going to add a little bit of ochre, yellow ochre to that to kind of cool it down a little bit. It's a little bit more yellow. And I'm going to use that to start to lighten up her little cheek. And I'm just going to blot my brush a little bit. I like to kind of, sometimes I like to flatten my brush out, even though this is like technically a round brush, but sometimes I like to flatten out a little bit to create like longer strokes. And I'm going to take a little bit more white. I'm going to go right in there with the white and kind of mix it right into this and just lighten that up and make little brush strokes. And create this part, create her little cheek. I'm going to go right into this ochre with my brush and just sort to add some of this. This changes it up a little bit. Go back into this pink, and I have not cleaned my brush at all. Like I'm kind of, as long as I'm kind of staying within these colors, it's okay to kind of mix them all together, you know, on your brush. Like you don't need to clean your brush every single time because I'm staying within the warm colors, I can kind of keep it all on my brush at different times and everything kind of kind of blends in together, you know? So you're not gonna, like these colors, like adding a little bit of ochre here isn't going to interfere with the color family. Okay, I'm just gonna keep. Then I'm going to kind of really want to work on the little beak, but I want to kind of keep working a little bit on this, on the face. I'm taking some of these like pink mixtures and just go over it, and it's already kind of coming together that way. Okay, I'm also going to, okay, how about let's work a little bit on the beak, because we barely have touched the beak. So I've got this very interesting mixture that I made here. It's like almost like a peachy color. It's mostly Sienna, Quinacridone red, and some umber and some white and some ochre. So I'm just going to put a little bit more ochre in that, and I'm just going to start to fill this in. I'm going to add where the lights are going to be here. So not always starting off with like darks to lights, but even then we're going to be doing this in phases. I just wanted to kind of get in this anatomy. So I'm kind of filling her in with this kind of peachy color. Oh, Donna, you're naming her Betty? We can name her Betty, Betty the chicken. Okay, so, and Michelle's asking me, do you have 2 different brushes for each color temperature section? I do not, because the brushes you're using doesn't always coincide with the kind of, I mean, I have a lot of different brushes. I have one thing of water where I clean everything, so no. Like if I'm about to go from like a darker color to say like a warm color to a cool color, no, I always clean my brush first. I wipe it down and then I keep going. So no, I don't keep like separate brushes for separate colors. Or I don't keep separate brushes for separate temperatures because it doesn't really make a lot of sense, you know? Because a brush is a brush once you clean it, you know? Okay, I'm gonna go back into my small filbert. Small and it's flat and it's got a little round tip, and I'm cleaning it, and I'm gonna go and take a little bit of this Quinacridone red and Sienna, and I'm gonna put a little bit of medium in there, wipe it down, and then I'm just gonna start to put a glaze down for the underneath of the beak. Just gonna put that down. Put a little glaze down. A little bit of that. A little bit of that pink. So we're just gonna lay her in, and then we're gonna clean it up. I'm gonna paint it again. For those of you guys where this is your first painting, is it kind of fun making your first painting be a hen? I'm going to add a little bit of this peachy color I made. I mean, who doesn't love painting animals, really? Like, I love painting animals. Animals are my favorite subjects. Like, I love painting people, but they are difficult to paint, you know? But animals, like, all you have to do is kind of make it look like a chicken, and then you have a chicken. Almost kind of looks like a cow. I mean, but if you don't make a person look like a particular person, then it doesn't, you know, it just looks like a person. So I love that I don't have to, it's not exactly a portrait of this chicken, you know. Okay, so I'm just sort of blending that in. And now we have the beak kind of laid in. I'm going to go into this peachy color that I'm going to take a little bit more of this ochre, a little bit more white. And I'm just going to try to really flatten out this tiny filbert that I have. So once again, I'm using this like small filbert. This is a crystal silver brand in zero size. Someone's asked me, animals are, oh, Donna, animals are also your favorite thing because they're amazing. I paint a lot of birds, but I think this might have been the very first chicken that I've ever painted. Okay. I'm going to wipe down my brush a little bit. I'm just going to put down my brush and I'm just taking it and just slow and blending what I have there. Taking a little bit of the medium maybe and kind of making that paint extend just a little bit more. So if you use medium, the paint will last just a little bit longer. You can kind of push it around a little bit more. I'm going to take that and just sort of, that's looking kind of cute. Then I'm going to go back to my pointy brush. It's my round. And I'm going to take my red violet and take a little bit of umber and maybe even a little bit of this Quinacridone red and kind of fill in. Just going to clean up that line. I want to keep it kind of uneven. There. So that's kind of cute. And I'm going to take a little bit of a highlight, a little bit of white. Just going to add a little bit. Add a little highlight where the nose is. So chickens are all detail, aren't they? You know? It's basically all detail. Like, I mean, a very big part of this, the last, like, say, half hour of this painting class will be mostly using this small brush. So I'm going to take another, I'm going to take some more Quinacridone red, add it to some white, add a little bit of ochre, and I'm just going to start to kind of give her under eye a little bit of something. And I'm also going to do little dots and do tiny little strokes around her eye. I'm going to take a little bit of white while there's still paint on my brush and just start to very lightly brush these little marks around her face. Maybe even lighten up parts of here. And then I'm going to get to the rest of the body. Now it's very exciting. It's a very long process. Go back to this peachy color, add. So now her eyes and everything is starting to like come together a little bit more once you kind of add these little things. I'm going to add a little bit of white, put it right there in the corner. So it kind of sparkles a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of white, add it to this peachy color, and maybe add a little bit more highlight to her beak. This is really starting to come together now. And before we do the body, I want to kind of just work a little bit more on the eye. I just want to kind of give, I'm going to take this red violet and just make the eye just a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to let that dry, and then we're going to go back to the eye. Okay, so I want to go back in with my filbert. So I'm using a filbert. This is a Quinacridone brand filbert in number 2. So it's about, you know, it's about that. It's not too big. And I'm going to go and take some white. I'm going to take some white, take a little bit. So I'm going to kind of keep these like mixtures on the side. Like you see I have some of this peachy color. I'm going to leave that there. And I'm going to take some umber and I'll put that there. And I'm going to take some white, like just straight white, and kind of mix that up. And with this, I'm going to add a little bit of medium. And you're going to see what I'm going to do. I'm going to use that. Oh, that's not white enough. I'm going to add some more white. I'm going to add some more white. So my white's a little bit dirty. Okay. And while everything is kind of flat, I'm going to just start brushing on the corners. And you'll see I'm kind of like very coarsely adding this white. And you're going to see also when I do that, you can still see the underneath, the underpainting. So we're not going to do that with everything, but for some of it we are. I'm going to just use that and start to brush in. So I'm going to brush everything in almost kind of like this. Like I'm going to be brushing everything in the, almost like in the, like literally in the direction of her fur, of her feathers. I'm going to go, her contours, like the volume of her is going to go like this. And I'm going to go, and you see I'm also going to feather the top a little bit. And in some places, I'm going to paint until I run out of paint, and then that's going to be like dry brushing. Dry brushing is when you don't have a lot of paint on your brush, and then it kind of has these like feathery edges. So I'm going to go right back into some of this white, and I'm going to leave some of that. I'm going to leave some of the look of that. And those are areas where, say already it's looking kind of like more feathery. And by kind of like painting until I run out of paint on my brush, you can see some parts are going to be nice, are going to have more paint than others, and that creates like a very interesting dimension. And I'm going to think about some areas like that. I'm going to take a little bit of umber and sort of demarcate areas like where the underneath of her feathers are going to be. Maybe I'll even leave some of this, right? This is kind of pretty, but maybe I'll paint over it just a little bit. Just because like down there it looks like really, or maybe I can really go into that and make it more pink. You know, like somebody had said earlier, it's like, oh, how come it's pink? It's like, why don't we just go a little bit pink? I'm going to take a little bit of this ochre also and kind of go over it randomly in different places also. And that's going to add some real fun dimension to this. Really, really fun. Take a little bit of medium, take a little bit of this ochre, grab some white, and I'm just going to go randomly. Like you can also add a little bit, for any of you guys who are just starting, you could also grab a tiny, tiny bit of Quinacridone red into that white and like really change up where some of these colors are. You know, like having little things like that, kind of like the little changes in her feathers makes it really pretty. And so to not to sort of have her like be all white, you know? So what if I kind of took a little bit of medium and grabbed a little bit Quinacridone red and put it right into that white, then that some parts will be pinker, which is kind of great. What if I grab a little bit of ochre while I do this? And then some parts will be more yellow. I mean, that's already really changing up the way she looks. Like she gives a little bit more dimension. I'm going to take a little bit of that medium, go into the umber, and I'm just going to start to brush. I'm just going to fill her in, or brush that in a little bit. And what if I, like, so somebody had mentioned that the underneath of her looks a little bit white. I am going to grab, it looks a little bit pink. I'm going to grab a little bit of Quinacridone red with some of this medium, grab a little bit of white, and like, let's really make that play out. Let's really do that. Like, let's make that part a little bit more pink. So I'm just kind of glazing by using medium. Like already, this looks kind of cool. I really love that that part's going to be pink. So I'm just using a little bit of medium. I'm using some medium, mixing it in with Quinacridone red. Oh, you can't see it. It's underneath there. But what I'm actually doing right now, guys, like for those of you who can't see, I'm grabbing a little Quinacridone red. I'm using medium, and I'm creating like a glaze. So you see how translucent that is? You see how translucent that is? And I'm using that to sort of like create almost like a translucent glaze. So glaze is like a very translucent layer of a color. So you use that by adding some medium. And doesn't that look kind of cool? Like that is now so pretty. Like all these like pretty warm colors. And completely not what I thought was gonna do until somebody mentioned, oh, how come this looks pink? I'm like, yeah, let's push that. Let's really push these colors. Add a little bit of ochre, some white. And that wasn't even in my example. I didn't even think to do that, so thank you. I'm gonna add a little bit more of white and some ochre, and I'm just gonna start to very randomly. There we go. Like, look how cool that looks. Like all these like pretty little dimensions. And I'm gonna grab, oh, drop my rag. So I'm gonna go back to my little brush, my little round brush, my little Princeton #2. And I'm gonna grab some umber, and I'm gonna go into some of these areas and just sort of decide that maybe I want some of this to be a little bit darker, and just sort of like add these little details. Like maybe I kind of want some of that more to peek out. And I'm going to grab a little bit of this cream color that I made. And see, like white isn't just white, you know? Like, yes, it's a white chicken. But knowing that, oh, what if I add all this other stuff? You know? That would be like really fun. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna take some of this umber, take some of this like red violet, and sort of choose areas where I'm gonna make it a little bit darker, Like this is all kind of glazed over, but I'm gonna leave some of that. But I want just sort of do little things. And take a little bit of this medium and do little things. Camilla, are you painting with me? My friend Camilla just moved to Chicago, and we were talking about you know, what we need to buy. So if you look down below, there is a link to all the colors that I'm using. And so for those of you guys who are just watching and who want to watch this episode later, or watch any of our other 7 episodes, this is episode 8. You guys can see in the description all the colors that we're using, but there's also now a link to where you can buy very particular things like brushes, the colors, and things like that. So that's like super helpful. And so I'm just going to fill this part in a little bit more. I'm going to take a little bit of white and add that to the Quinacridone red, and take a little bit of this cadmium and mix that in a little bit. And I'm going to use this little brush and just start to coarsely fill in a little crown on her head. If anybody knows the anatomy and what this part is called, please let me know. And I'm going to take a little bit of this cream color and a little bit of ochre and just sort of like lightly suggest the dimensions for it. A little bit more of this peachy color. Kind of outline a little bit. I'm taking a little bit of cadmium yellow, and I'm just going to start to do little things. So now everything is starting to come a little bit more together. I'm going to also work on the underneath. I'm going to take a little bit of that red violet and a little bit of umber and just sort of work on this part here, a little underneath area, a little underneath the beak area. Take a little bit more cadmium. Just gonna go over this part a little bit more. A little bit of ochre. And I'm just gonna do some very quick, we're not gonna go really crazy detailed underneath there because we're also gonna put some feathers over there. So let's not go crazy. Everything does not have to get painted. Every tiny feather does not have to get painted. So I had made here this like white, this cream color, which I'm using, which I made with ochre and with some white, and even a little bit of, tiny bit of umber. And I'm going to use that. Use that color and just kind of go underneath. Kind of do like little things and go back into the white. My brush is still very dirty. I have not cleaned it. And I'm just using that to create a little illusion of some like very coarse feathers. There's some loose feathers. Take some of this, straight up some of this white. And just highlight her a little bit more. Maybe I can darken some of these parts. I'm going to take a little bit of this umber and kind of darken up some of this area. Here we go. I'm taking a lot of these warm colors that are on my palette and just using them randomly. So there's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason, but the fact that these are all very similar in the colors, or in like the color family, the warm color family, I can go right in and everything is not getting disrupted. So like it's not like I'm coming down here and playing around up here, you know? Like all of my warm colors are all in one place. But if I start adding in any like blue right here, this is all going to become like mush. It's all going to become like browns, and then it's not going to look as pretty. Like the colors won't stay as clean. So I'm going to go into my whites and just start to play along with the edges right there. I'm using my little brush and just sort of adding more dimensions to her. I'm going right into the white. Making her a little bit coarse up there, which is kind of nice. I'm going to give her a little bit of highlighting here since I have the colors on my brush. And I kind of want to also work on the eye. There we go. Yes, it is totally like a balancing act with the colors. Like the whole background is pretty cool, and the whole foreground is very warm. So they kind of juxtapose each other, which works really nicely, you know? Like, so we're not like, so if the whole background were, say, yellow, the whole thing would like fight her, you know, fight the image. So like creating contrast within the painting is also very important. Okay. And I'm just gonna take a little bit more white and just sort of brighten this part up a little bit more. Take a little bit of medium and just kind of go over bits and pieces, but I really want to work on her eye. And then that will be like, and then we can kind of head towards the finish line. So remember how crazy it looked an hour ago, and now it's sort of like all coming together, just like I promised, you know? Like paintings all look kind of nuts when you first start them. Like that's like a guarantee. Like all paintings look crazy when you first start them. And all paintings kind of go through like a weird ugly duck phase. Okay, just gonna fix the anatomy somewhat as I'm doing this. Kind of think I want that a little bit more. So let's work a little bit on the eye. Okay, so I just cleaned my brush. I'm going to still continue to work with this tiny one, even though I'm not really sure if this is the best thing to do. I'm going to take a little bit of this cadmium orange, mix it in with this yellow ochre. I'm going to try not to get too close to the painting, but I'm going to kind of try to make it look like it's looking at us. So I'm just going to clean that part up a little bit. So I think I had the pupil just a little bit too big. So now it's looking a little bit more like she is looking right at us. No? Staring into your soul, guys. Just looking right at you. What is she thinking? And she's looking at you. What are you guys thinking while she's looking at you? So I'm going to leave that part up just a little bit. I'm going to clean my brush. And I kind of want to clean up this a little bit. I'm going to wait for that to dry a little bit, but I'm going to take a little bit of this cadmium yellow light, get it up here, take a little bit of white, kind of mix that in just a little bit. And take a little bit of ochre so it's not super bright. And I'm just going to start going over parts of this. And just sort of deciding that this part will be a little bit lighter. So now she's looking right at you. Somebody says it's a frightening stare. She's looking at you. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit more right around the eyeball. And, oh, I'm going to take a little bit more. I'm going to make her eyeball just a little bit bigger. Rather the pupil just a little bit bigger. I'm going to go back into this red violet. Now she's looking at us. Elizabeth, yes, the judgy chicken is judgy. She knows things. She knows what's going on. I'm just going to clean that up just a little bit. And take a little bit of the cadmium, tiny bit of ochre. I'm going to take a little tiny bit of umber and put that in the cadmium. And I'm going to put it right here on the side, right here. and take a little bit. I'm going to go right into the ochre and use that to blend a little bit with my little brush. Now it looks a lot more dimensional. Ooh, look at this chicken. Look at this little hen. I'm gonna take a little bit of, take some ochre. I'm gonna take some umber. I'm gonna put it right down there. I'm gonna add a little bit of ochre to it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little rim around this eye. And just to kind of soften that a little bit. I don't know if you can see it under the camera. That kind of softens that edge of the eye a little bit. Maybe you can't see it. Maybe it's like a lost cause for me to talk that I'm doing it, but I want to do it anyway. I'm going to take a little bit of this more umber, put a little bit of that back in the ochre, and really maybe see if I can make it stand out just a little bit for you guys. There. So it's a little bit more. So I'm going to take a little bit more of this cadmium light and just sort of make it even lighter up here. And sort of give it a little bit more of a highlight down there. And that's really starting to look together, you know? Cheryl, she's definitely too pretty to eat. She's really cute. Okay, I'm going to take, I'm still using my pointy brush. I'm going to start putting a little highlight. I'm going to put a highlight right here, and I'm going to use my finger and soften it. And then I'm going to add another little dash here and soften it with my eye. And now it looks like there's like a little bit of a reflection in her eye, right? So I'm going to do a little bit more up here and use my fingers and kind of just move that a little bit. Now it really looks like there's like a reflection right at her. And I'm going to go into my Quinacridone red, some white, a little bit of ochre, and I'm just going to start to give this all just a little bit more. I'm going to add a few more feathers around her eye. I think like maybe the look is very stark. I think I might soften up some of these lines around her. I take a little bit of this yellow and ochre and kind of just soften up that stare just a little bit. Like this is right now, like this is all very outlined, so I'm just gonna clean that up a little bit more. So now it's kind of like softens a little bit because I'm kind of cleaning up some of these like very strong lines around her. Because otherwise it really just looks like she's staring at us with her knowing little eyes. I'm going to kind of highlight and lighten up around her eye a little bit more. Add some highlights around her nostrils. Few more. I'm going to go right into some of these random pinks and creams I've made and just sort of add random feathers. Maybe take some white and just kind of go and add. And add some random textures. There, just some knowing, just some little things, you know, kind of really make the whole thing pop a little bit. Doesn't have to be everywhere. I highly suggest you not putting all those highlights everywhere because it'll make you crazy. I think even when you're making something really realistically, it's okay to kind of think about what parts to simplify, because I have a tendency to want to paint everything. And then, the beauty of like art is that you're not, like I myself am not like a photorealistic painter. Like I love the idea of kind of making something look real, but have the illusion of it being kind of like still like a concept, Oh, I should lighten up. I can lighten up the beak a little bit. Let's do that. I'm gonna take, I'm gonna go back into my very small, my small filbert. Okay, my number 0 filbert. And I can totally do that. Good job. Thank you for telling me. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bit of medium and go into this like peachy color. And I'm gonna just sort of highlight, use that to kind of glaze over her beak. It's a little cuter, right? It's a little bit better. Tiny little bit of white. Let's add a little bit more white and keep lightening it. I'm just going to use a little bit of medium. Is that a little bit better? I think that looks a little nicer. Just a little bit more bright. I'm going to clean that edge up a little bit though. I'm going to go into my very little brush and take a little bit of this Payne's gray. Let's go back into this weird Payne's gray and white mixture that I made and just kind of clean up. Clean up the edge of her. Thanks, guys. A little chicken. A little hen. Okay. There we go. Yeah, just a few more details makes it more realistic. You don't need a ton. Like I know that somebody here was saying how they have this like incredible need to make it really realistic, but sometimes when you add too many details, it might even kind of go like too far, But having like I'm not painting every feather. I'm sort of creating almost like an illusion of the feathers. And because otherwise if I were going to paint every feather, every little rib of a feather, that would make me probably nuts, and it probably wouldn't even be as much fun to look at, I think that I am not, as I said, I'm not like a super photorealistic painter. Like I try my best, like I'd like to try, but I realize that for me, I really love the idea of creating like an illusion of something. And sometimes, so I kind of like the background is kind of loose. I want to keep the background fairly loose. Hello, Daniel. Good to see you. Just popping in now near the end. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more, a few more feathers, and then I'm going to call it at some point. What do you guys think? What do you think of the beak? Are you feeling better at the beak? Like, I think she's pretty cute. She's got a cute little face. I'm going to add a few more of these feathers underneath with my little brush. Like, I actually have nothing against like making things really hyper realistic. I'm just like really not that kind of artist, but I think that actually it's really nice to have that as a goal, like to get really good at something. It's like getting really good at speaking a language and then coming back a little bit and like having and creating like slang for it, which is what I kind of think styles are, like creating a slang for a language, like your own like slant of the art language. Let me take a little bit more of that white and some pink. Maybe clean up some of this also. It's good to have a birthday where you're making art, you know, or looking at art. Are you guys happy? What do you guys think? Do you think there's anything else that needs to get done? What do you think? How are we feeling? Are we all exhausted from painting? I'm feeling pretty good. I'm trying to see if there's anything here that I'm like, oh, I really want to kind of change a little bit. It's kind of a fun one because it actually isn't as, in a lot of ways, because you're just kind of making little strokes, you know? Well, how about you guys, for those of you guys where this is your first time painting? Like, how did you feel about doing this painting? How did you, was it like, did you find it to be like more, like easier than you thought, more difficult than you thought? Or was it just like a really fun, wild ride? I'm gonna do a little bit more here. Oh, I love it when one of my favorite art supply companies say they like what I'm doing. Hello, Jerry's Artorama. I used to love going to your store when it was in the city. When it was New York City, I loved it. Went all the time. My friends all worked there. It was one of my favorite places to go. Okay, are we feeling good, guys? We're gonna take a deep breath. We're gonna look at this little chicken for a second, and then I'm gonna, you know, send you guys off, move things a little bit. And do you guys think there's anything else that I need to do here? Are we kind of like in a good place? Okay. So I really hoped you enjoyed painting this little hen with me. So this is episode 8. This is actually the end of season 1 for painting together with acrylics. You can still catch Scott Meyer's Drawing Together show every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And I really hope that you guys will show me what you do. Go to our landing page, and for every episode, you guys can look at each episode link and post what you do. And I want to see what you guys are doing. And also, you guys always can find me on social media. My Instagram is gigichen.art, gigichen.art on Instagram. And you could always, if you guys feel really shy about showing your work on the Artist Network website, definitely show me. Definitely shoot me a note and send me what you guys are doing. And always go to artistnetwork.com, where you can catch many, 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 many how-to videos on different types of materials like watercolors, acrylics, oils. And so there's just endless resources there. So I'm signing off, and hopefully I will see you guys all really soon. Thank you.